Good day. Welcome to this webinar, Data Masking in Oracle PeopleSoft. How are you able to responsibly handle the use of privacy-sensitive data outside your production environments? And how does it work, practically spoken, on a PeopleSoft Oracle source? These questions and others will be present at this webinar during the next 30 minutes. Today you have DATPROF presenting this webinar in combination with SANS EC, the expert center in the education world in the Netherlands. My name is Michael de Boer. I'm a partner manager at DATPROF, and we are the domestic market leader in test data management in the Dutch market. With us today from SANS EC is Kees Sip, and Kees will act as a guest speaker. Kees, you're welcome to introduce yourself in a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. As you said, I'm Kees Sip. I'm working at the SANS Expertise Center, and our main goal is to supply 3 universities, 2 in Amsterdam and 1 in Leiden. And for my effort is to see how we can do the analysis of the environments from the 3 universities, their test database, their developing database, and their training database. But I'll show you later on. Thank you, Michael. Back to you again.
Yeah, it's great to have you on board today, Kees. We do have an option for participants to ask questions. At this time, the chat box is disabled, but it will be enabled at the end of this session. So please feel free to ask questions at the end of this webinar. The topics we will be handling today are basically related to the test data challenges our customers face. We will dive into the concepts with regards to masking of data and give you a fluent demo in an ideal situation. After this ideal situation, it's Kees' turn to show you how that actually works on a PeopleSoft environment. So he'll give an application of our toolset used on PeopleSoft. He'll also have some time on sharing his template and about the audit reporting options that come with the solution. We will conclude this webinar looking at your challenges as an organization or as a participant. And of course, how can you explore these solutions and what are your options there? In looking at what we see with our most customers and their questions, if you look at their challenges they are facing, then the first one is typically related to the time and the availability of a refresh. Data sources tend to grow over time and have a larger size. This results in a longer throughput time in order to copy it, and quite often resulting into not copying it anymore. This really leads to having all data or no data available whatsoever. At least it's not as optimal as it could be when you need data for testing. Another common challenge is that we see a lot of customers spending time on searching for the right test data, just to find the right scenario for the test case. If you have to work with your entire set, it can be a real headache finding the right case that you need. So if you look at our more mature customers, they've all moved to using Subset as one of the great solutions to find the right data. This also relates to the question of the availability. If you are an organization having multiple teams working with the same data, it's great to be able to have access to the same data. But quite often, we see that there's a single source that's being copied, so one team has to wait for the other team to be able to have access to the data. Another common challenge, and that's of course part of this webinar today, is the legislation. We do see a lot of privacy rules nowadays coming at us, so it's great to be able to comply with that. And that's not only because you try to avoid high fines, but it's also showing the desirable behavior and try to be careful with your brand, not have any brand damage. Another part that comes with compliancy is the option of having proof that you can actually prove that you are compliant. When you start masking, it's quite handy to have it end-to-end masked. So meaning that you do not only have the main source anonymized in your landscape, but you are able to have the other sources anonymized in the same way. So you can consistently use test data throughout your landscape. So we'll look at consistency over a series of sources, but also consistency within a source today. Another common challenge is how to handle this cost effective. What are the right tools to be able to rapidly implement, and how are you able to do a cost-effective maintenance if you have a solution in place? So looking at these challenges, how would you do that concept-wise? If you look at our typical customers' environments, then you see that there is a production source somewhere, and we would then create a master test data environment where you can make a temporary copy of this source. The first step then is to look at the source with DATPROF Analyze. This is a tool set that's used to generate statistics on the source. So the least frequent value, the most frequent value, longest, shortest value. It gives you a great idea of the data pollution present in the source. And it is this data pollution that you do want to have present again in your mask set. And it can also be great input for using it in a subset. Another feature that's available within DATPROF Analyze is the option to do data profiling. And this is a great way to be able to determine where the privacy sensitive data is stored within a data model. So it gives you great input about the level of privacy sensitiveness of your source. So if you've gathered this information, you can then use it to, for instance, make a data masking template within DATPROF Privacy. In this toolset, you come up with a series of different masking rules. So you could decide to scramble fields, you could shuffle first names against last names, or you could alter dates, empty fields, up until the moment that you are able to come up with a masking, but the dataset is still usable for your testing purposes. Once it's masked, you can then use subset for the distribution to get it to the end user teams. Now, this could be a subset of 10% or a single case or a larger portion, whatever you would need for your testing purposes. To do the execution and the entire refresh of your test environment, DATPROF runtime is really the core building block to do that. So say if you are a tester, you would log on to runtime in order to order a new test data set. If you are a security officer, you would go there to look at the audit reports that come with masking runs. And if you're an administrator, this is the place where you build your entire test data refresh process and you're able to do error handling. Since we're going to look at data masking today, we're going to look at DATPROF Privacy in a bit more detail. So looking at DATPROF Privacy, what we do in the first step is that we make a connection with a data set, import the metadata, so not the data itself, but just the metadata of the set, and use that to come up with a masking template. And it's this template in which you typically would define 10 up to 15 different rules, where you would decide how you would mask the data. So you could indeed do some shuffling, you could regenerate new social security numbers, or create new bank account numbers, or an entire series of different rules up until a point that you're saying, I'm happy with the level of masking, but it's still usable for my test purposes. So once that template is in place, you can then hand it over to the runtime platform. That will translate it into queries, and those are being offered to the source. And this results in two products. One, the anonymized source, and the other one, the audit report that comes with it. So once you have this template in place, then you can reuse it to do it over and over again. Now here at DATPROF, we have got multiple tools you can use for your masking. Ideally, we would love to show them all to you, but given the focus of this webinar, we're going to focus on DATPROF Privacy and DATPROF Runtime for now. So I'll give you a brief demo of how Privacy and Runtime work together. So this is DATPROF Privacy. This is the way the interface looks. So let's start by offering you a new project. Let's call it peoplesoft. And we've just created a new project here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a connection to a source. In this case, it's an Oracle source. And let's see if we do have a connection. So let's use this connection. We now can start to import the metadata of this source. That's quite important that it's just the metadata. So it's not the data itself, but it's just a data model and its relationships. So this is a demo database I'm showing you on. We'll move to peoplesoft in the next round. So we've got 13 tables. It finds 17 foreign keys. So let's import them all. So we have the metadata available to us to come up with masking rules. So it's completed its import. And now we have the import. We can start building a template. We do see project versioning throughout the toolset, as we do see the synchronization of the metadata as an easy feature available in the toolset as well. So let's look at the development here. This data model has customers and it has some customer history. So let's look at the customers and add some masking functions. So we could decide that we want to do the shuffling of the first name against the last name. And what we could do is that we could use both last names, the one in regular case and the uppercase, and add a function. So in this case, let's say that we're going to do a shuffle. And this data set has two different types of people in there. It has civilians. So we're going to do the shuffle for the civilians only. And it also has military personnel. So we'll apply a different rule to that one. So let's shuffle the civilians, see if it works. It does what it should do. So we've put that function on there, and you do see it appearing here at the bottom, including the condition that comes with it. So if we would say, let's come up with something for the military personnel, let's select the first name, the last name, and even a partner name and a full last name, and make it a bit more tough, the function. In this case, we could scramble all of these fields. Make it conditional for the part that's different from civilians. So let's put it in this fashion. So that's the remainder of the set. So now we have two functions here. So for instance, we could add fixed values. It would be really nice to have everybody working at DATPROF from now on. So let's change the company name into DATPROF and make sure that everyone is with us. So that works as well. So we can put it in here. We could regenerate new bank account numbers. We could create new email addresses, blur salaries, do something with the gender. Now, to give an idea of a date of birth, we could add a, we could alter the date of birth and put everybody to the first of the month, or we could make a custom expression if that would be desirable in your case. So basically, this is what you do to come up with a variety of different functions. Once in a while, you do have the desire to be able to consistently mask, and that's consistently over a series of sources, but it could also be consistent within one source. So say, for instance, that you have not only customers, but you have customer history as well, and you would like to alter these last names in the same way you've done within the customer part here. So what we then would do is that we would introduce a translation table, and that could be a permanent one, or it could, just exist during the run, depending on your security policy and how you would like to implement it. So let's say we want to shuffle up this one and reuse it. We then would say, let's create a translation table and put it at some certain spot during the process, and let's call it translation table name. So what it does for you, it puts this table right here at the bottom corner, and it holds the last name in the old way and the new version, and it does the same for the uppercase. So if you decide to use translation tables, now it's optional. Some customers decide to not use them, but if you do use them, a lot of customers use a script to clear out the translation tables before you hand it over to the testing community, making sure that there is no way to reverse it back. So now we have this one available. We can use it within the customer history. So let's say that we would like to mask the last name here. In this case, we use a value lookup. So let's say that we would use the translation table as the lookup table and find a column to make contact to. In this case, I would use the customer ID and do that on both sides. And if it's in place, we can then make a mapping. So let's look at the last name, and as a lookup column, we would use then the new last name. If it's not there, let's add a scramble to it. So we have it here. One thing is important, this value lookup can only actually work and run if it's running after the translation table exists. So that means that this function has a dependency with the first function. So we then would say, let's do the scramble first and the shuffle first and build a process of dependencies as well. So now we have here a very first version of a masking template for this data set, and we then would move on to the deployment. Now the execution of these templates is done within DATPROF runtime. So let's move to DATPROF runtime to give you an idea of how we would do the execution here. So let's log on to the password manager. So this is DATPROF runtime with different environments. And in this case, we've set it up with different sources. We could do some masking. And once they're masked, we could use subset to bring it to the development teams. And if you look at more mature customers, then they do foreign key discovery or, for instance, integration with the test automation, such as Tosca, or use our Jenkins plugin or any other runtime app available to them. But for now, let's just look at masking the CRM system. I'll just simply hit the start button, and that will give me the scenario to anonymize an existing privacy template. So I've hit that one. It actually will start it up, unpack it, and start up the run. So we do see the run starting right here on the screen. And the nice thing is that you can monitor this run. So let's dive into the run, and you see the execution here of this template taking place. So runtime is really the environment control. It gives you not only insight in the execution of the template, but it also gives you the option to add users with different roles in order to be able to have role segregation. The other part we find here is the trigger and event system. So we have an automated way of doing a refresh throughout a series of sources. So say, for instance, that we would put a trigger on the status of a run. And we could, if it's an error, we could send a WhatsApp to a user, or we could start up a script, or it's basically an OS call, so you can do anything you would like. Let's say it's done, and then we would start up the next one, and so on. So this is a really great way of doing the full automation. Another nice thing here is that we have multiple agents being able to do the execution for you. So we just have one agent running for you, but if you would do multiple sources simultaneously, you would have multiple agents doing the tasks for you. So this is a real fast glimpse of the execution. There's a lot more to it, but it hopes gives you an idea how it would work in an ideal world. So this is the way we would do it over here. If you would look at how we done it in real life, it's great to move to a real life example. In this case, it's the masking of PeopleSoft done by Sans AC. So I'll stop my screen sharing and give it to Kees Sip. So Kees can take over, and you would have a great way to have an idea of how that would work in a practical way.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I'm taking over the screen and switch to my environment to show you some things about how we act, how we created our anonymizations for the 3 universities. I'll start with starting DATPROF privacy. That's one of the tools from them, and open an existing project. I will expand my screen so you can have a better look. I have a connection with a local database to show you what's going on. I'll edit the connection, and I'm going to test if the environment works fine. The connection is successful, so I can use this connection. And what I'm going to do is show you a few of the parts that we use to do our anonymization. As you can see, there are quite a lot of tables in the environment, and actually in PeopleSoft there are more of 30,000 tables in the environment, but I only started to do the anonymization with the records that are part of the person model, because that's the part I do the anonymization with. But for now I do use a nice feature of DATPROF privacy. This is the button right here. I can click this on, and now it's only showing the 5 records, the 5 tables that are avoided, that are part of my project. And I show you some things about those 5 tables, starting with the names. What I do was a shuffle on the names, and I did it not in a way that I shuffled a total of the content of the tables, but I do it on the gender. I do on the females, the males, and the ones without gender written down. And that's what I intend to do. I show you the function. It's just a shuffle, but in the condition, you can see that I picked up the gender, the sex, from the PERS data affected dated table, because it's not written in the names table itself, it's written in the PERS data affected dated. Also, you can test it. That's very handy, because when you make an error in, for instance, the syntax in a SQL and you're going to test again, then you can see it's going to fail. So that's not a nice thing when you have a demo. I tested again. This is very nice to see that's happening. I also put a timestamp and an update operate, so you can see in your reporting when the anonymization have taken place and who did it, who did the anonymization. The second table we use is the PERS-NIT. And here I did a few things. At first, the national ID that's used in the Netherlands, I'm a part of the Netherlands universities, I scrambled. I just put unknown data to see what's happening. But especially for the training environments, that wasn't very handy. So I created a function, and this function I'll show later on, but I'll show you how you can call a function that is part of the project we're using. But I can't use all those new numbers, so I choose to make a condition. I choose where the national ID is not filled, and only for the Dutch available persons, so the country would be NLD from the Netherlands. I can test it also, very handy again. You see that's a small part of our environment that uses those kind of social security numbers. The other part of the numbers that not consist of the condition that they're in the Netherlands, they're not of the Netherlands. That's what I'm going to do with them, is going to scramble. And that's what that was the old thing I was doing. It's also this record, I put a timestamp and an update. The timestamp I will show you. It's just a function, just put timestamp, and then it will be placed in instead of the last date that was in the table. Another record is the person, always sensitive data, for instance, the date of death. That's not so nice. Something what is nice is the birth date. And a function that's a standard in DATPROF privacy is the birth date. You put it on the first day of the month or the first day of the year. Well, what did our client say from Amsterdam and from Leiden? I don't want it to be on the first day of the month, but I want it to be on the last day of the month. Well, that's something to think about, but also here you can put a function, so that would be written, the date will be changed in the last day of a month. The date of death, there I use a standard function from DATPROF privacy, and here you can see the first day in the year, or as I told you earlier, you can put it on the first day in a month. It depends on what you want, of course. That's the thing that you want to do. The person SA, this is also a field with certain place of death and death certificate numbers. There I put a scramble on, so it would be easy to scramble those information, because you don't want it in a test environment, or nor you want it to be seen in a other environment, the development or the training environment. One other record, this is a special record, a special table that is used for the Netherlands. This, as it names NLD, it is filled with very few data, but it's sometimes is filled with more data. It depends on how you use it. So what I did, I didn't put any condition on it, and I can test from here how many data is in it. There are only 14 records available in this table, and I just scramble those 14 records in the table. Well, that's a short overview from the tables that I'm more using. I told you I'll show you some functions. Here are some, on this option are additional scripts. And as you can see, I have this one. It's written in Dutch. This is how you make your new ID. It's just a function. It's just a SQL function that you can test in your SQL environment if you want to, but you can put it also here in DATPROF, and you can call it in the person table or the personate table to use a new function. Another thing is that you want to know, because it's very handy, you can just also use an update statement that's usual then done in SQL, but I want it to be at the same place, so it would be more handy for me. As Michael told you, you can put it on a sequence because there are dependency. For instance, you want to create first the function for the new IDs, and afterwards you can use it. Well, that's also possible with scripts and functions. There's another great possibility to show what is in the project you have. There are two things: visual data. I will expand the screen also, and you see that it's not so handy to see what's going on. All those records, and I do on purpose not explore them, but you can see in green 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 records that are in green, and those records are the only records that are have some function in this project. So you have to think it over. How many tables are you putting in your project? Because when you have too much, it would be a bit unhandy to see them over there. Well, of course you can zoom in, zoom out, and you can put them in another way. If you want to, you can reorder them. So that's very handy. But there's also another functionality, and this is a really nice feature that shows you what the process is that is going on. I shall zoom in a bit, and you can see in this block, that is the anonymization. And before there are some steps. In this case, is the function that I need for an ID. But you can also see that here, and I am aware of that it's not so good to see, but you get the idea, I hope. I told you I did it on a gender niveau, the females, the males, and the persons without the gender in the database. You can put it in a sequence that you want to, and after you do your anonymization, you can do some other steps if you want to. So it's really handy. You could see this flow when you're developing a project. Of course, it's in the reporting also, but when you are a developer, it's very nice to see your product as well. Well, this is the DATPROF privacy creation of a project. Now I'm going to show how it runs in a runtime version. I will minimize this one. I will open a browser with a very low, with a user with very low authorization. And I have here a screen open with the administrator. You can see this is a project. I already run this project just a few minutes ago, and I can start this project. And I have only one button. I want to analyze. And you can see in this window where a low-level user with only one button, he can start a project, and you can start it with an agent, but you could also start it with a low-level user to do the anonymization. I will minimize this screen. I will expand this screen, and this is a screen from the administrator, so I can look at the things that are happening live with the anonymization, and it's divided in several parts, and you can see what's going on. Well, we can wait for a few minutes, but that's not so handy. I will show you the run history, and then you can see exactly the same things that is going to happen now here in real time. I click run history, and I see that now number 15 that is running. This is one we just started up, and this one I started just an hour ago, 2 hours ago, and that is what we're going to look. we are looking at the audit report, and it's very nice that you can watch it, you can look at it with a browser, and you can explore all the things what you can do. Here is the names table with the female, the male, and the persons without sex, what's going to happen, the timestamp, the update, upgrade. So you can have a very, very handy report to show what's going on in your project. So you have a proof when it's happened, what has happened, and so on and so on. Here you can see that are yellow marked rules. This is database settings, and they are enabled of no. So that's why they are yellow, because they are not enabled. And here is another, the update statement I showed you earlier, that's also not enabled. But you can also sometimes have failures or other specific things that will happen over here. Well, this was my part of showing. I will end my screen sharing and give it back to you, Michael.
Yeah, Kees, thank you very much for sharing that with us. For us, it's great to have one of our partners demonstrate our toolset, and it's great that we've been able to look at an actual template in the application of DATPROF privacy, in this case built by SunCC. I hope it's given you a sort of insight of the potential complexity you can have in a template. And now they have this template available for this peoplesoft solution, so it's actually reusable when it's handy. You know, if you look at your challenges you're facing in your organization today, are you able to have access to a test data set that's easily refreshed and it covers your test scenarios? And in what regards to your test scenarios, are you able to find the right data, or you're still searching in a huge data set for this one test case you need? This relates to the availability to end user teams. Are you able to make the distribution available to multiple teams at the same time, or are they still dependent on each other and waiting for each other to have access to test data? And then of course the most important thing today, are you able to easily be compliant when it comes to test data, and do you have the availability of audit reporting? You know, and if you're busy with masking, make sure that you do take into account that you consistently mask, and you can do that consistently within a source, but you could also apply this end-to-end over a series of different sources, so making sure that your chain of different sources is end-to-end masked in the same way. And if you look at the challenge, please use the right tool set and reuse knowledge available out there, so making sure that's come to a cost-effective solution without having too much of an implementation effort and having a small maintenance effort. So given these challenges, let's move on to further exploration of these solutions. How would you be able to use that? So one part would be to ask this expertise center SunCC to reuse the information, so we can reuse the template in other PeopleSoft solutions with SunCC present. We also see a scenario with some of our customers who decide to have their own staff become trained in the solution. So you can become an expert yourself. Do the training. We've got an online curriculum available, including with trials, so you can play around with the toolset and become an expert and get certified in the DATPROF solutions. There's also another option of reaching out to experts there. So you can hire one part of our DATPROF Professional Services members or one of our other partners. It could be a local partner such as SunCC. It could also be part of a global partner program. So this concludes our webinar for today. We do hope that you've had a good webinar and have had insight in the options available to you when it comes to masking a Oracle PeopleSoft source. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and send us an email. Thank you for your attention.